Welcome back to another Interview Wednesday here on Turnbuckle Trash Talk. I am the officiant, Kent, and joining me is another officiant, referee Kai Douglas. You may not have heard of him yet, but you've probably seen him in some very specific spots on NXT, reffing in Evolve, FIP, ACW. You've really been making miles, making towns, getting your name out there, but you've only been reffing less than 6 months, or is it about 6 months at this point?
I think it might be like exactly 6 months. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for joining me. I'm so excited
Thank you
to
for
talk.
having me.
Yeah,
Appreciate it.
I'm excited to talk to you because you've had a long relationship with wrestling.
Very long.
And it's just kind of taken into a new chapter now. But let's take it back to the very, very beginning. What's your first wrestling memory that you can still remember? What comes through when you think about wrestling in the very beginning?
Before in the business, the first thing I can think of is when I was 6 years old. I dressed like the Ultimate Warrior because my dad brought me to my first live event, and I think it was in 1990 at the Richfield Coliseum, and I'm from Cleveland originally, and going there and sitting front row on the aisle, and I remember, no, it must have been later than that because it was The Undertaker, right when The Undertaker came out, because I remember he came down the aisle, and I was so scared, I was terrified. And my dad kind of nudged me forward, and I was like, hell no.
Who were your favorites, growing up as you throughout the years? Who did you find yourself most interested in, a bigger fan of? Like, who were your favorite wrestlers?
Starting out, definitely Ultimate Warrior. He was always my favorite. Obviously, Hulk Hogan, everyone loved him.
I think all of us in the older years know Hulk Hogan.
Right, yeah. Being a kid and writing him letters when Tugboat crushed him. I remember that.
And was there a particular moment or time that made you decide, hey, I want to get involved with this, like wrestling? I need to be more involved than just beyond a fan level?
I think I was probably when my father started taking me to independent shows in Ohio, in Akron and Cleveland area. I fell in love with it then, and slowly but surely I started asking if I could do things. They'd let me pass out flyers one time, or they'd let me set up the chairs. And, I think by the time I was 14 or 15, I was on the ring crew. So, and you couldn't be under 18 and wrestle.
Right.
So that's, I was just doing anything I could do. So one day they decided to use me. At first they were going to put me under a mask when I was 16. I was a sophomore. And that didn't work out because they were just too sketched out. So I was a manager, actually. And I used to come out and I used to cut these extravagant promos. And I have them somewhere at home. I got to find them, like on the little VHS. The ones you put inside the VHS tape, there's hundreds of them. But those were the good old days. So from then, I started wrestling in West Virginia because they didn't really care or didn't really know about it down there. It was like small, like coal mining town or something like that.
So you kind of took the trial by fire route. You didn't go necessarily the traditional, went to a school, got trained. I trained in the back of a billiards hall, actually, in Massillon, Ohio, and it wasn't very long, so it wasn't like nowadays where we have these these schools, like here, like WWN school, like that's. Back then, you kind of knew somebody that knew somebody. Yeah, actually, I'm very interested to hear about like how you kind of got into it, because it is very opposed to a lot of the wrestlers I talk to these days who just said, I Googled, I checked out which schools were close to me, I found one I could afford, and nice. I went. Like cool. In the days you were coming up, it was more like you had to know somebody and you had to go to shows consistently and help out. So I'm sorry, please continue. I didn't mean to cut you off.
No.
That's very cool. It's a different story as opposed to most I hear.
Right. And, obviously the dream was never to be the ring crew guy. Obviously, I loved it because I was like, I get to touch the ring, for God's sakes, So
I don't think anyone gets into wrestling to be on the ring crew.
So slowly, like I said, in Ohio, they were kind of strict about, not strict, but they didn't want to take the chance of getting caught underage.
Definite liability
I get hurt.
Yeah.
I mean, I was doing spots as a manager. I'd come out in this suit and tie, I was named the Big Timer, and I would take power bombs and stuff like that. And obviously I always wanted to wrestle. So going back to the West Virginia, so no one really knew about it down there. It was a small town, so that's when I started wrestling, and then I trained. So while we were wrestling, I met one of the wrestlers, and he said, come to this billiard hall, and it's in the back of this billiard hall, and there's just a ring. and trained for about 3 months, I'd say. And then I kind of just got out of the business completely after that.
What was training like for you? What did you find came easiest? What was more difficult? Some people say bumping was a lot harder than I expected it to be, or something like that. So what did you find to be the easiest part of wrestling training, and then what was more difficult?
I think back then, I think the bumping was probably the easiest part.
Oh, really?
Because I would, everyone back then was backyard wrestling and stuff, so I would practice. And I think when I was 13, I did a fantasy seminar before one of the shows with Matt Bourne, Doing. So I kind of was familiar with a little bit of bumping, but the cardio, that's what I hated. You just stand in the middle of the ring and just chop your feet until he's left, right, or hit the ropes, front bump, stuff that they do at the PC. So that was probably the worst of it, but I'm glad.
Yeah, just pushing you on the cardio versus.
It's totally different.
Yeah.
It's I run now long distances all the time, for fun, and it's not the same at all.
No, it's amazing to see how many guys are tearing up the indies and then they go do a performance center tryout and they're that is the most difficult thing I've ever had to do. And I'm really impressed with how over the years, maintaining fitness, maintaining shape has been just a normal, natural part of your routine. That takes a certain discipline that a lot of people like myself don't have. What is it that keeps you motivated into staying in shape? Is it just, feeling good about the way you look or feeling good about the way you feel? What is your motivation to continue to drive yourself physically the way you do?
Lately, more than ever, I'd say in the last 6 months, since I've started reffing, I've been going real hardcore lately, but since I'd say even before I got into the wrestling business and after when I was playing football, and just going in there with the whole team, and you got the whole team everyone's pumping you up, and you're doing these competitions and stuff like that. So I kind of fell in love with that aspect of it, the camaraderie, and then just the hard work. And then after I got out of the wrestling the first time, I tried out for many semi-pro football teams, in the Arena League and stuff. So I kept, in shape for stuff like that. And I don't know, maybe it was just because I did it so long or whatever. I can't see myself not.
It became almost habitual,
I can't
a
not
normal
do
day.
It now.
Yeah.
Yeah, you know what I mean? I'm always Googling new ways. Now I'm into more things like meditation and yoga and, different explosive movements. I just want to be an all-around athlete.
Did you find coming from a sports background benefited you when it came to wrestling training and kind of transitioning into more of a wrestling lifestyle? Did you find that having already, been through sports, especially football, which is kind of, impactful and intense, right. Did you find that was a benefit or a drawback? And what were the differences? I've talked to some people who they were well, I was an athlete, so I thought normally the athletics would kind of benefit or be the same,
route,
and then it was completely different for them, and they were surprised at the different, ways wrestling worked. How did you feel that transition worked?
Well, this time around, I think it helped a lot because when I got out of wrestling the first time, I always had played football, but pee-wee and middle school and stuff, that's not really, when I got out of wrestling, I think I was going into my junior year of high school, and that's the first time I played high school football. So then it was on a different level of fitness. So I kind of missed that because I did wrestling first. But now this time, having 19 years that I have been out of the business, but I've still been training like a pro athlete, yeah, it made so much easier for me.
What do you remember about your first match? Tell me the story about what that went, who you were facing, how you feel like it went overall, and kind of the experience, because it's always funny to hear first match stories. I've heard some great ones, and I've heard some absolutely nightmarish ones. What was your first match like?
My first match was in, I can't remember the town, somewhere in southern Ohio, but it's called Clay's RV Park. And it was somewhere where you'd see an outdoor concert. It's got a big stage with a ramp, and then just you see all these RVs and tents and everything out there. So the crowd is so far away already. We're up on the stage. So it's hard enough to see your favorite band if you're that far back, you know.
Yeah.
It's so it was a quick match, but it was something that we had gone over 1,000 times at our house, me and my buddy. So we had it down pat, but so we decided to go in the crowd, And looking back on it, I wish there was video of it because we're just brawling with all these people. They got blankets and like picnic baskets and stuff. It was an experience. Greg the Hammer Valentine was on that show. The Iron Sheik was on that show, and Hacksaw Jim Duggan was on that show. So it was a cool first show. Like there's a lot of like people I grew up watching because I was born in the early '80s. So.
Oh no, working a match with Hacksaw Jim Duggan is like one of the highlights of my entire life. So I totally can relate to that. What made you decide to stop?
What, wrestling?
Yeah.
I think, like I said, when I was in high school, I was never eligible to play football. I just never like really applied myself in school. So when I finally I was in my junior year. That's when I started playing football. And I don't know, I've told this story before, and I don't know if I've like lost love for the business or I just was like, this whole new thing opened up and like, that's like your golden age of high school, like 17, 18. So it was like, maybe I wanted to like explore other things. I really don't know exactly why.
I can totally relate to that because I feel like football, it sounds like to me football was the dream, wrestling was the possibility. And as soon as football became the possibility, of course, that being the dream, why wouldn't you chase that?
Right. And being 16 still, I was like just about to turn 17. So legally, I still had another 2 years to go until I wrestled. So it could have been one of those things where maybe I was like, I'll step away and play football until I'm able to. And then football, I got a lot of scholarship offers and stuff. So maybe that was probably what it was. Now that I just said that out loud.
Opening all the avenues.
That's probably what it was.
Yeah, I can go to college and I can actually
play football
pursue.
and play like small safety or something.
I find with a lot of people too, wrestling kind of is that constant that'll come in and out of your life. You'll be in love with it for a while, and then you'll drop off in like high school or peer pressure or whatever, and then you'll find it again later in life. It's one of those things that's just ongoing, and you can love it on and off however long you want.
Right.
You don't have to be in love with it the whole time. What made you decide to come back?
Well, I told this story too. I told this story at my tryout as part of my promo, which just basically was like my story of my last, I'd say, 9 months, which was I was living in Ohio. I was with the girl I thought I was going to marry. We just had purchased a house. We were fixing it up. We had a really successful business that we built from the ground up. And one day she just didn't want to do it anymore. So I was out of a house. I was out. I had my job and my truck. That's all I had. I was homeless for a little while. I actually slept in an abandoned Toys R Us.
Oh, wow.
A couple times. But, and I don't know why, but so when we broke up and stuff, I got rid of all my social media. I didn't want nothing to do with it. So when I started a new one, I was trying to remember all the pages I used to follow. And I don't know why WWN came up, because I had never been to a WWN show. I lived in Clearwater for like 9 years, but I didn't know this was even here. So I followed them, and I went on their website, and it's when they had the Evolve tryout. And I was like, if this isn't the universe's way of like picking me out of like the darkest like hole and being like, this thing just popped up for some reason. So I saved every dime I had. I sold a lot of stuff, and I came down here. I spent $800, and I moved here too. And then I realized on Sunday when the camp was over, I was like, now I just live in Florida, and like the camp's over. Like, now what do I do?
Now what do I do? Yeah.
So I'm like, I'm just here, and I live in Fort Myers, which is 2.5 hours from here. So I'm like, now what? And then Trevin Adams, can't say enough good things about him. He pulled me aside when I was on my way out of here in this very building where we had the camp, and asked if I'd want to like ref for ACW. And then I met Lee, and then I met you, and you guys brought me under your wing. So yeah, like that whole story. I don't know if that answers the question.
It does. No, it seemed like it was a very
like
right time, right place scenario. Like all the pieces just kind of fell into place.
Yep, and I might not have done that if, something had to make me do that. So losing everything, I think, I always thought I was in great shape. I could go WWE and stuff, like at least get a tryout, and but I just never did. I was just I was settling at the time, and now I'm glad that it happened because I would have just settled.
Well, and your story is so great and so inspirational because we always hear of the stories of how wrestling ruined people's lives and like marriages fell apart and people died because of drugs and all this other stuff because of wrestling. It's so nice to hear the inspirational stories of like wrestling saved me. Wrestling saved
my life.
Wrestling
it really
gave you
did.
a purpose and a new lease on life and really like kind of brought you out of the shitter, so to speak, and back into like something. Why did you choose to be a ref instead of a wrestler?
Well, back then I was, young, and you didn't pay attention to the refs like I do now, but it was all about the flash and the flair and everything like that. Now I'm just at a point in my life, I'm like real spiritual and stuff, and I try to like eliminate my ego as much as possible. So I was like, what can I do in the wrestling business that's not, I don't have to go out there and I don't have to have a gimmick or anything like that. Like, I just want to be a part, and I felt reffing was like the foundation of every match, every show. Like, you know what I mean? 'Cause
it's a very important role.
I didn't know how much stuff we did until I started,
Well, and that brings me to my next question. What do you feel like is the biggest differences between being a wrestler and a referee? What did you find you had to like alter your mindset or like learn how to, like, how do you feel like those two roles are different? Because I feel like a lot of people take referees for granted.
Oh,
I'd love to hear from a newer referee kind of what was your mindset after I wrestled and now I'm reffing, so I have to change my entire perspective on stuff. How do you feel like that was?
I feel like it was almost like I had to learn everything for wrestling, and before I could just learn reffing, you almost had to like unlearn all the wrestling stuff, because instead of, remembering a whole spot and going over it, or like me when I was a manager when I was a kid, I'd read my promo like 1,000 times. Now, I have other responsibilities in that ring, and it's not just one match. It's not even just matches. It's like whole parts and stuff like that. So, yeah, just like going from like knowing everything that's going to happen to knowing like what the finish is, where do I need to be at certain times, is there anything funky about this match, anything I need to know, relaying times, telling people to face the hard cam, anything, like at Evolve, like I get so many things from Gabe, and it's not even just like look at the hard cam, it's like small, minute things that most people wouldn't think of.
Yeah,
like,
very detail-oriented.
Like, take your
stuff.
time. Like now hulk up, and now take your time. And he'll like orchestrate the match in my ear, and so that's totally different from obviously.
Yeah,
being
we're
a
not
wrestler.
there to just count to 3. Like we are actually like assistant
we have a
directors
lot of responsibility
of the show, because we do have to relay that information, like time, like positioning, like any messages that the directors or producers feel like passing along at any given moment.
Right.
Not to mention also being responsible for the safety of all the wrestlers on the show.
Yeah, exactly.
That's a big part of it too. You mentioned Evolve, and that's actually a great transition to what I wanted to talk to next. You've had almost like a rocket ship journey in refereeing. You started out at ACW, which a lot of us do, but before we knew it, you were on Evolve. You were doing guest spots on NXT. What's the journey been like in this 6 months, going from pretty much nothing to now being on television and traveling and everything like that? What's that journey been like for you?
I can't say how grateful I am for doing that camp, because if I didn't do that, I don't think any of this would be possible. And how I feel about it, I got to pinch myself all the time. You know what I mean? Just from doing my first Evolve show, learning is the biggest thing I could say, because I get to learn from so many great people. But everything about it is just looking at it from a different point of view, especially at NXT, because you're there all day, so you're watching, you're observing, you get to see how the machine works and take that and bring it to what you do. So the last 6 months have just been a crazy ride. I've been all over at least this side of the country, with Evolve. I haven't been to the last couple because I'm finishing up an injury. I'm almost back.
You're almost back.
Yeah,
You're almost there.
I'll be back in like an hour.
What's like a crazy or funny story you have to tell
Ooh.
about the last 6 months that has happened? Like just something unexpected or wild.
So we were doing Evolve. I forget what the number was, but it was in Charlotte, North Carolina, at this event center, and we did PWX too, and then we did Evolve. And I think I had to go get my phone charger or something. I drove to this show. Normally I fly.
Yeah.
But I drove to Atlanta, because the Saturday was in Atlanta, and then Sunday was in Charlotte. So I run to my car, and I get something, and the building comes down, and then it cuts off, and then all the cars are back there. So I'm walking, and I'm just walking casually, and the building cuts off, and I can see like the rest of the parking lot, and I look over, and there's 3 fully grown elephants in the parking lot. And I was like, I'm not seeing this. This isn't real. And
clearly, it's sleep deprivation from all the driving.
Exactly. So then, and I went on my first skydiving trip the day before, so maybe my brain was like messing with me. So I run to my car, I come back, and I'm like, if they're still there, it was real. So I look over, and as I looked, like the last foot and the tail is going into like this massive garage door. And I'm like, what do they have, like a circus going? And it's in the same building we're running in. So I don't know if there's like a curtain somewhere that separates two sides of this building, but that was the funniest, craziest, and just most random thing.
That's absolutely wild and bizarre, and not what I expected at all. Like you hear about pranks and backstage stories. You're talking about elephants at the same venue that you were doing a wrestling show. That's
and
insane.
then to validate it, like I had to come back, and I was like, you guys won't believe this, but I just saw 3 fully grown elephants, and Austin Theory's like, oh no, I saw them. I was like, okay, so I'm not crazy.
So in wrestling, it's a very dangerous sport. I think people take for granted how dangerous it is, even though it's predetermined or choreographed. I'm not going to use the F word because I just don't believe it. But you had an injury recently on NXT. Why don't you take us through that and kind of what the experience has been in the road to recovery? I mean, what happened basically, and what's it been like since?
Well, yeah, I was doing this spot where I got tossed out of the ring, and there's just a big melee going on, so there's bodies everywhere. And I got thrown out, and where I was gonna land right on my friend's head. And I had to make a decision like in the air. So I planted my foot, and when I did that, I cleared him. I went up and over him, but my foot just like locked right there where it was. And I never thought anything of it because, I've rolled my ankle so many times throughout my life in football, and, a day or two in a bag of ice, you're fine. And like a week went by, wasn't fine. And then I put an air boot on. I wore like an air cast for 2 weeks. I've been resting. I've been doing everything. Catalina's been like telling me all these tips and stuff, like trying to help me out. And I'm like, I've been doing everything you said. Why isn't it working? So we're at I think today is actually 8 weeks exactly. And I was in the ring for about an hour and a half earlier doing all kinds of drills, all like the drills that we did in the PC tryout, like all that stuff, like backpedaling, shuffling, and I feel good. And Dr. Dave just taped me up, so I think I'm going to have a match tonight.
Well, and honestly, the truth of the matter is wrestling's not as glamorous as it looks. We don't make a lot of money.
Whoa.
A lot of us don't have insurance, so it's not just like, I could hear people being like, well, just go to the doctor and find out what's going on. It's not always necessarily a possibility unless it's something really severe that requires that. So you've been kind of having to self-prescribe, self-medicate, physical therapy your
Watch
way
a lot
back.
of YouTube videos.
A lot of YouTube
1,000
videos.
YouTube videos.
Now, I could see an injury causing a lot of people to decide, well, this is too dangerous. I can't do this. Like, I'm moving away. What has been the biggest motivator for you to come back?
It sounds cliche, but I didn't come this far just to come this far. That's my mentality.
Like, you got a long way to go.
Yeah, I didn't do all this and move across the country and do all this for this. No way. You have to kill me.
What's the goal for you? What's the end game?
I want to, hopefully one day work for NXT and WWE, and that's been my dream since I was like 4 or 5, and I'm getting ready to turn 35. So for 3 decades, on and off, weaving through the years, it's been my dream. So I'm not going to stop.
Well, and
now.
you've had a taste of it now, so
Yeah,
now it's
exactly.
even more in sight.
After being inside the PC, and every time I'd get tired, I'd look up at they have a sign on the top of the thing that says "Live Your Dream." I just kept looking at that as I was holding my throw up down.
So I'm going to take you to the final 4 questions I ask everybody in every interview. Number 1, I want to hear your perspective about wrestling as a whole right now. We've got the Wednesday Night Wars going on. We've got NWA. We've got the coronavirus threatening to cancel WrestleMania. There's a lot kind of moving and shaking more than there probably has been in over a decade. But also, it's not necessarily showing the results that people expect. Ratings are kind of acceptable, but not great. I want to just hear what your thoughts are about wrestling.
I think overall, I think it's thriving, and I think there's no better time to be in this business in any aspect of it. You know what I mean? There's so many platforms to cover it if you're in the media or if you're in the business, especially in the indies. There's so many good indies now. And as far as the coronavirus thing, I think by April by April 1st. We're not even going to
talk. You think it'll be okay?
We'll be talking about something else by then, I think.
All right.
But, yeah, what was the last part of the question?
Oh, I was just asking kind of like what your thoughts were about wrestling.
Oh, the ratings. I think it's hard now because we're in the era of YouTube and streaming. I don't have cable, you know what I mean? So I guess you can't really go off of that.
Yeah. What misconceptions or illusions did you have about wrestling that were quickly dispelled once you actually started doing it? And this could be from a wrestler or a referee perspective. Like, oh, I didn't think referees were responsible for as much as they are. Or, I didn't think this would hurt as much as it does. Like, talk through that.
Definitely the referee thing. That's still I still learn things all the time going to NXT, like things I never would have thought of, that you're responsible for, don't celebrate right now, there's a replay going on, or stuff like that. So I never thought that, but on the wrestling side of it, I never, on TV you're like, I can bounce off those ropes, do all this stuff, and I didn't realize how taxing it is on the cardio.
Those ropes hurt, man.
That too.
More than people thought.
But just like going back a couple times, the first time I ever got in a ring, I'm just jumping around and stuff, I'm like, they make it look so easy on TV,
If you had to give a piece of advice to someone who was interested in getting into wrestling, haven't started training, haven't even investigated it, what would you tell them?
I would tell them if they're actually serious about it and it's something that they've always wanted to do, you have to do it, but you have to do it like 200%. You have to put money into your gear. If you're a wrestler, you have to put money into your gear, you got to make sure you're doing promos every day. You literally have to pretend you're Tom Brady and dissect every single thing. You can't just be like, come into the arena, eat some chips. You know what I mean? If you're going to do it, I say take it seriously because there are plenty of restaurants to eat at now. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So,
if you could change one thing about wrestling, whether it's backstage, fan perception, the pay, nothing's off limits. What would you change about wrestling?
That's a really good question. Now that NXT is around, I feel like before I would have said, let's go back to like something that kind of brings me halfway back to the Attitude Era, because that's, that was my like heyday when I was
me too.
A teenager. So, but other than that, I don't know. I feel like there's something for everyone now, but I don't know. I don't think I'd change anything.
I've had some people say they wish, there was a more teamwork mindset, but now you've experienced wrestling on multiple levels from indies to, NXT.
Well, that's the thing. Like on the indies, I obviously haven't been on them long, but one thing I have noticed is when you're at NXT or, during our tryout and stuff, you're treated like your family. You know what I mean?
So you feel like there is kind of more of that teamwork mindset on the higher levels than there is maybe necessarily.
They don't have any business. They don't have to talk to us. They don't have to like go out of their way to like say hi to us and stuff. And they do. And if we have questions, they want us to ask questions and stuff. And that stuff's invaluable.
Yeah.
I get to sit with Mr. Regal for probably an hour every time I'm at NXT. It's like twice a month. So 2 hours a month I get to sit with Mr. Regal, just like we're doing right now, and get like tips and pointers and stuff. Like that stuff's just, you can't buy that. You know what I mean?
Now I want to take us to a segment that referee Tony Stabile has named Take It Home, which is where you get to promote any of your social media, where people can find you, promotions people can commonly see you at, maybe not specific shows, but anything you want to promote, now's your time to shine.
All right, you can follow me. I'm most active on Instagram. It's at Kai Douglas, Kai Douglas, WWN. And on Facebook, Stephen Kai Douglas. And I think I have a Twitter, but I don't know.
Yeah,
I don't use it. I check it to like read, like to learn stuff, but like, I don't have anything to say on there. So, but yeah, and all the promotions you can find me in are under the WWN family, from Evolve to ACW and Kaiju Big Battle and everything else.
You might see him occasionally in the background on NXT.
Yeah, I'll be in over there too. So, but WWN for sure. I mean, this is my family. I wouldn't be here without them and you and Lee and Trevin especially, because he didn't have to ask me to come here.
It's true.
And ever since he did,
life-changing moment.
Ever since he did, it's been awesome. It's been a hell of a ride, man.
Well, Kai, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Thank you guys for joining us for another Interview Wednesday here on Turnbuckle Trash Talk.